The story begins with the sound of rain tapping against the cracked window of a small apartment in downtown Cincinnati. Emily Harris sat curled up on the worn sofa, clutching an overdue rent notice in her hands. The words seemed to blur together, but the bold red letters screaming final warning burned themselves into her mind. She had always tried to keep her life together, always believed that if she worked hard, things would eventually balance out, but life had different plans. Emily was 29, a single mother raising her 8-year-old daughter, Lily. She had moved into the apartment 2 years ago after leaving her husband, Mark, when their marriage crumbled under the weight of broken promises and distance. She worked long hours as a receptionist at a local dental office, barely scraping together enough to cover bills, food, and school supplies. Her job wasn't glamorous, but it gave her structure, and she clung to that structure desperately. But then came the cutbacks. Her hours were reduced, and though she picked up side work babysitting and doing odd jobs for neighbors, it wasn't enough. Now she was 2 months behind on rent, and her landlord, Mr. Robert Mitchell, wasn't the type to show leniency. Robert was in his early 40s, a businessman who inherited several properties from his father. He had a reputation for being strict with tenants, but Emily had always noticed a strange mixture in his demeanor, stern when it came to rules, yet oddly kind in small ways, like fixing a leaky pipe himself instead of charging for a plumber or bringing over fresh coffee when he came to collect rent early on Sunday mornings. She had never thought much of it, but now, with her back against the wall, she felt a strange mix of dread and hope about having to face him. That evening, as the rain continued to fall, Emily heard a knock on the door. She opened it hesitantly, finding Robert standing there, holding an umbrella and a manila envelope. His expression was unreadable, though his eyes softened slightly when they landed on her tired face. "Evening, Emily," he said calmly. "I need to talk to you about the rent." Her stomach dropped. She nodded and stepped aside, letting him in. Robert glanced around the modest apartment, his eyes catching on Lily's school drawings taped to the wall. Emily tried to steady her breathing, her heart pounding against her ribs. "Robert," she began, her voice trembling, "I know I'm behind. Things have been hard since the office cut my hours, and I'm doing everything I can to make up for it. Please just give me a little more time." Robert sighed, setting the envelope on the coffee table. "Emily, I've given extensions before, but the property taxes are due soon, and I can't keep covering costs without rent coming in. You're already 2 months behind." Tears welled in her eyes, and she quickly wiped them away, embarrassed. "I don't have anywhere else to go. Lily needs stability. I just need a chance." Robert looked at her for a long moment, his brow furrowed. He wasn't an unkind man, but he was practical, and practicality told him that leniency wasn't good for business. Still, something in Emily's voice tugged at him. She wasn't trying to cheat him, and he could see the exhaustion in her face, the weight she carried alone. After a pause, he said softly, "Maybe there's another way. Maybe we can work something out." Emily blinked, her heart leaping. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Robert said carefully, "instead of money, perhaps you could do work for me. Not just small things, but real work. I've got properties that need attention, painting, cleaning, organizing files. It's not glamorous, but it would be worth something. If you're willing, I could apply the hours toward your rent." Relief flooded Emily's chest, though it was tangled with hesitation. She had feared the worst, that he might demand something inappropriate, but his offer was fair. Honest. She nodded quickly. "Yes, I can do that. Anything. Thank you." Robert smiled faintly. "All right. We'll draw up an agreement tomorrow. This way you keep your home, and I get help I could use." From that day on, Emily's life shifted. She split her time between her receptionist job and working on Robert's properties. She scrubbed dusty hallways, repainted faded walls, and organized piles of old paperwork. Robert would often stop by to check on her progress, sometimes bringing sandwiches or coffee. At first, their conversations were polite and professional, but slowly, they grew warmer. Emily noticed things about him she hadn't before. How he listened intently when she spoke, never interrupting. How he asked about Lily's school projects and remembered small details about her life. How his laugh, rare as it was, carried warmth that seemed to melt the tension in her chest. For his part, Robert found himself drawn to Emily's resilience. She worked harder than anyone he knew, never complaining, even when the tasks were grueling. He admired her strength, her devotion to Lily, and the quiet grace with which she carried herself despite the hardships pressing down on her. Weeks turned into months. Emily managed to catch up on her rent through the deal they struck, but by then, their relationship had changed. They lingered in conversations longer than necessary. She found herself smiling when his name appeared on her phone, asking if she could stop by a property after work. There was an unspoken bond forming between them, something neither had planned, but both felt deeply. One late evening, after finishing a painting job in one of Robert's empty rental units, Emily sat on the floor, exhausted, her hands speckled with paint. Robert walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee. He set one beside her and sat down across from her, leaning back against the wall. "You've done more in a few weeks than most contractors would have," he said with a small smile. "I should be paying you double." Emily laughed softly, taking a sip of the coffee. "Careful, I might hold you to that." Their eyes met, and for a moment, silence hung between them, heavy but not uncomfortable. Emily felt her heart race, a warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with the coffee. She quickly looked away, reminding herself of the boundaries she had to keep. But boundaries have a way of blurring when 2 people share struggle, kindness, and quiet moments in empty rooms. The connection between them deepened until it became undeniable. Yet Emily carried guilt. She thought of Lily, of the promises she had made to protect her daughter from instability. She thought of Mark, her ex-husband, and the way their marriage had crumbled. She feared repeating the same mistakes. Robert, too, wrestled with conflict. He had always kept a professional distance from tenants, but with Emily, that line had already blurred. He didn't want to take advantage of her situation. He didn't want to be another man who complicated her life. And yet, their hearts kept pulling them closer. The story of Emily and Robert wasn't one of scandal, but of 2 broken people finding unexpected comfort in each other's presence. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't simple. There were arguments, moments of hesitation, and long nights where Emily lay awake wondering if she was doing the right thing. But there were also moments of laughter, of shared dinners, of Lily sitting happily between them as Robert helped her with homework. What began as desperation slowly grew into trust, and that trust blossomed into something deeper. Emily never expected to find love again,